Hey there, welcome back to another video. Just like last time, my name is Nick. Got my notes right here like always, and I figured with arena football leagues kicking off their season across the country right now at this time of the year, figured what better time than right now than to do a video highlighting one of the most bizarre seasons that this sport or sports in general really has ever seen that I don't think we will ever see again. So the year is 2018. The league, the Arena Football League, and the team that we're going to focus on in this video is the Washington Valor. Now, the Arena Football League is a shell of what it once was at this point. I think at its height, it had up to 16 teams that spread across the entire country. And at this point in 2018, they have four teams, and it was pretty much just a mid Atlantic league. It was not as widespread as it once was. Those four teams are the Albany Empire, the Baltimore Brigade, the Philadelphia Soul, and the Washington Valor. The AFL would have a 12-game schedule during this season, meaning that every team would play the other three teams four times during the regular season. But like I said, we're going to be focusing specifically on the Washington Valor. So in week one, the Valor would be in Baltimore to open their season against the Brigade. They would go on to lose their opening game 61-56, which is just a one possession loss for the Valor. In week two, coming out of that loss, they would get their only bye week of the entire season in week two, which crazy, crazy concept. So looking to iron out some kinks, figure out what went wrong. You only lost by one possession. Let's go out, get that back in the next one, right? Week three, Washington finds themselves in Philadelphia taking on the Philadelphia Soul. And they would once again lose by just one possession. This time it was by a score of 52-49, meaning going into week four, they are 0-2. They would be taking a trip up to Albany for week four, their third straight road game to kick off the season. So through the first 4 weeks, they had away game, bye week, away game, away game. What a way to kick off your season. Could you imagine the outrage that fans would have in the NFL if that was their schedule to kick off the season? It would not go well. But they would be in Albany taking on the Albany Empire, and they would once again find themselves in the loss column, losing 47-23 and giving them an 0-3 record as they head out of Albany back to Washington. Week 5 would be their first home game where they would host the Albany Empire. There was no home field advantage for the Valor playing in Capital One Arena. They would go on to lose 53-42, and after this game, the Valor would part ways with head coach Dean Kukinos. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, and they would name Benji McDowell their interim head coach. In week 6, Washington would once again host a game, this time against the Baltimore Brigade. They would go on to lose another one possession game, this time by a score of 42-41, giving them an 0-5 record to start the season. In week 7, they would once again be on the road in Albany to face the Empire for their third time this season. And their second trip to Albany was no better than their first one. They would lose 48-21, dropping to 0-6 as they would head back to Washington for week 8, where they would host the Philadelphia Soul. This would be another one possession loss for the Washington Valor, their fourth of the season, as they lose 51-46, dropping them to 0-7 on the season. In week 9, they would travel back to Philadelphia for their second trip there this season, and things are starting to change for the Washington Valor. After 8 weeks of losing and bye week and not being able to finish off those one possession games, they are finally able to break through. They beat the Philadelphia Soul by a score of 49-48, a one possession game in their favor, improving to a 1-7 record on the season. Coming off of this win, you'd think they'd be able to build some momentum going into week 10. They're visiting Baltimore, but they were not able to keep the momentum going. Not only did they just not keep the momentum, you could argue that they were probably worse off after their win because they lost by a score of 72-42. That is a 30-point differential, dropping them to a record of 1-8 on the season. In week 11, they would be facing off against the Philadelphia Soul again, this time in Washington. 2 weeks after getting their first win to the Philadelphia Soul came back for revenge. They would beat the Valor at home by a score of 63-28. That is a 35-point differential. So they get their first win of the season in week 9. And then in week 10 and week 11, you combine, they had a minus 65-point differential after getting your first win of the season. How are you supposed to be? What? Coming out of week 11, the Valor have a record of 1-9. Things are not looking great for them. In week 12, just to put some salt in the wound, they are hosting the best team in the league at this point, the Albany Empire, who is also a team that the Valor have not been able to figure out. This is their fourth and final meeting during the regular season, and the Empire can't strike back because the Valor never struck in the first place. But the Empire would win 55-41, sending the Valor into the last week of the season with a 1-10 record. In week 13, they would end their season the same way they started it, playing the Baltimore Brigade. This time, the Valor are the host. And for the final time this season, the Valor would get a win. They would beat the Baltimore Brigade by a score of 42-35, and they would finish their record with a 2-10, or they would finish their season with a 2-10 record, excuse me. That 2-10 record was good enough for last place in the Arena Football League. Unfortunately, having a 2-10 record did not eliminate them from playoff contention because there were only 4 teams in the league, so everybody made the playoffs. But having the worst record in the league meant that they were matching up against the best team in the league, who was the Albany Empire, a team that they did not beat once during the entire regular season. So the playoff format was a bit strange. They did 2 games each round, and the best combined score, the team that had the highest combined score, moved on to the Arena Bowl. So in the first game, Washington would play host to the Albany Empire, and another one possession game that did not go their way. The Empire would win in overtime by a score of 57-56. So going into game 2, the Valor would have to win by 2 or more points for them to move on. A crazy feat considering you think about the fact that they have now played the Empire 5 times and have not won a single game against the Empire. Oh, and they're also going to Albany for game 2. But this is why we play the games. Because in their 6th time meeting up against the Albany Empire, again, a team that they have not beat all season, the Valor get it done. They win by a score of 47-40, giving them a series total of 103-97, meaning the Washington Valor punched their ticket to Arena Bowl 31 after winning just 2 regular season games. They would face off against the Baltimore Brigade in the Arena Bowl, which, side note, Monumental Sports owned both teams, so either way, they were coming out of this Arena Bowl champions. Ownership was. But against all odds, the Washington Valor go in, stand their ground, and become Arena Bowl 31 champions, beating the Brigade by a score of 69-55, meaning they might be the worst champions in sports history. How do you have a record of 2-10, make the playoffs, and then go on a run to win the championship of your league? Ultimately, I think this shows why the Arena Football League only had one more season after this. That's not a great look to have your champion be a team that has 2 wins during the regular season. But I just thought this was a crazy story. I'm not sure how many people pay attention to arena football, but I remember this happening and going, what? A 2-win champion? Anyway, if you made it this far, you might as well hit that subscribe button, especially if you like sports content, semi-regular. I do crazy deep dives like this, bunch of other stuff. I'm sure you'll find something you like. But like I was going to say until I went off on that tangent, if you made it this far, hit that subscribe button. If you do that, you're going to help me start funding my hat addiction, which means you'll get to see your favorite team's hat on my head the next time I do a video on them. But until then, bye-bye.